The strange signals came in the middle of the night. Dr. Alan Carter sat up straight in his chair, rubbing his tired eyes as the computer screen flashed with unusual patterns. After 20 years at the Global Space Initiative, he had seen many odd cosmic phenomena, but nothing like this. "That's not natural," he whispered to himself, fingers flying across the keyboard. The signal repeated in perfect intervals, too precise to be random. He reached for his phone. Within hours, the quiet research facility transformed into a hive of activity. Scientists huddled around monitors while government officials spoke in hushed, urgent tones. They all knew what this meant. Humanity was no longer alone. "Dr. Carter, can you verify the origin?" asked Director Wilson, her voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. Alan nodded. "It's coming from just beyond Neptune's orbit. The signal structure indicates artificial origin, beyond any doubt." 3 days later, Captain Susan Miller stood at attention as she received her new assignment. The steel-walled briefing room of the United Nations Space Defense Force headquarters felt colder than usual. "Captain, you'll be heading our response team," General Hayes said, sliding a tablet across the table. "We need someone with your background in both military strategy and xenobiology." Susan scanned the document quickly. "Sir, these readings suggest the object is decelerating. It's not passing through, it's coming to us. Exactly why we need you on this, Miller. Assemble your team by 600 tomorrow." As Susan left the building, she glanced up at the night sky. Somewhere up there, someone, was approaching Earth with purpose. The world governments tried to keep the news quiet, but rumors spread. Amateur astronomers noticed the unusual object, and social media erupted with theories. By the end of the week, the President of the United States addressed the nation. "My fellow Americans, I can confirm that we have detected what appears to be an extraterrestrial vessel approaching our solar system. I assure you that we are taking all necessary precautions. There is no cause for panic." But in secure facilities around the world, there was plenty of cause for concern. "The craft is slowing at the edge of our system," Alan explained to the Emergency UN Council. "Based on its trajectory and speed adjustments, it appears to be controlled with precision. This is no accident." Susan's team had set up operations in a hardened facility beneath the Rocky Mountains. Engineers, linguists, diplomats, and soldiers worked around the clock preparing for every possible scenario. "Latest visuals coming in," called out Jack Nelson, the team's communications specialist. The main screen flickered to show a sleek, silvery craft unlike anything humans had built. It moved with impossible grace, defying known physics. "That's like nothing we've ever seen," Susan said, her training barely containing her awe. "What's its current position?" "Just past Jupiter's orbit and continuing to decelerate," Jack replied. "At current speed, it will reach Earth orbit in approximately 5 days." In the following days, more ships appeared, larger ones hanging back while the first, smaller vessel continued its approach. The pattern was clear. This was a scouting mission. World leaders gathered in emergency session at the UN. Military forces went on high alert. Religious leaders called for prayer. Ordinary people stocked supplies or simply went about their lives, the unreality of the situation making normal routines seem suddenly precious. On the 5th day, the scout ship entered Earth orbit and transmitted a new signal, a complex mathematical sequence followed by what appeared to be language patterns. Alan's team worked frantically to decode the message, and by midnight they had their answer. "It's a greeting," Alan told the assembled officials, his voice betraying a mix of excitement and fear, "and a request to send representatives. They call themselves the Hegemony." Susan looked at the translated message on her screen, a chill running down her spine as she read between the lines. The wording was polite, diplomatic even, but something about the tone suggested not a meeting of equals, but an inspection. "They're not here to make friends," she said quietly. "They're here to assess us." The first contact with the Galactic Empire had begun. 7 days after the scout ship entered Earth's orbit, the main vessel of the Hegemony arrived. It dwarfed anything humans had ever built, stretching nearly a mile long with a gleaming surface that seemed to shift colors in the sunlight. The United Nations hastily prepared their Grand Assembly Hall for the arrival of Ambassador Zixtar. World leaders sat nervously as the alien delegation entered the room. The ambassador stood nearly 7 feet tall with iridescent skin and 4 arms. Despite the alien appearance, the translator devices the hegemony provided made communication surprisingly easy. "We bring greetings from the Galactic hegemony," Zixtar announced, voice smooth and confident. "Your world has been noticed by our survey teams. We are pleased to welcome you into our protection." The ambassador spoke of trade, cultural exchange, and technological advancement. He smiled often, showing rows of perfectly aligned teeth. But Dr. Alan Carter, sitting in the observer section, noticed how the ambassador's eyes never smiled along with his mouth. "They speak to us like we're children," Alan whispered to Lisa Dawson, his research partner. Lisa nodded slightly. "Did you notice? He keeps using the word protection, but never alliance or partnership." Later that evening, while the world's diplomats attended a reception for the hegemony delegates, Alan and Lisa slipped into the observatory. They had noticed unusual transmission patterns between the hegemony ships that weren't part of the official communications. "I've isolated the frequency," Lisa said, adjusting the equipment. "It's encrypted, but I think I can." The monitor suddenly filled with alien script that their computers quickly translated. Alan read aloud, "World Assessment, Class 3 Development, Rich Mineral Resources, Minimal Defensive Capability, Recommended for Standard Integration Procedure." Lisa's face paled. "They're cataloging us like a resource." Meanwhile, Captain Susan Miller assembled a small team in a secure underground facility. She had been watching the hegemony ships closely, studying their movements and technologies. "Jack, what have you found?" she asked Engineer Jack Nelson, who had been analyzing the limited sensor data they had on the alien ships. Jack pulled up a holographic display. "Their hull material absorbs energy in a way I've never seen. But there's something interesting. When hit with specific frequency patterns, the material temporarily destabilizes." Susan nodded thoughtfully. "Keep working on that. We need options." 2 days later, Ambassador Zixtar presented the UN with what he called a protection treaty. The document promised technological advancement and defense against cosmic threats in exchange for reasonable resource access and administrative oversight. Eric Walsh, the UN's chief diplomat, spent hours reviewing the document with his team. "The language is deliberately vague," he told Secretary General Perez. "These clauses would give them unrestricted mining rights across the planet and veto power over our own laws." Across the globe, people watched news reports about the alien visitors with a mixture of hope and fear. The hegemony had carefully crafted their public image, showing off impressive but carefully selected technologies and speaking of a peaceful galaxy under their guidance. What they didn't show were the detailed scans they were taking of Earth's resources, military installations, and infrastructure. Lisa managed to access more hidden communications by piggybacking on the hegemony's own signal. What she found confirmed their worst fears. According to their internal classifications, Lisa told the Emergency Council, Earth is marked as ripe for colonization, with a note about our manageable resistance potential. Susan looked around the room at the grim faces of military and political leaders. "They're not here for friendship. This is an invasion with a smile." The ambassador had given Earth 30 days to sign the treaty. As the deadline approached, humans prepared their response, knowing that refusing the hegemony's generous offer might trigger the empire to show its true intentions. The stage was set for humanity's first real test against the stars. Eric Walsh hadn't slept in 36 hours. The UN diplomat's desk was covered with tablets and printouts of the hegemony's treaty. He had read every line a dozen times, consulting with legal experts from around the world. Now, as dawn broke over New York, he finally found what he was looking for. "It's buried in subsection 47B," Eric explained to the Emergency Council the next morning. The language seems innocent, but when cross-referenced with their definitions in Appendix C, it gives them unrestricted access to extract any resources they deem non-essential to planetary function. Secretary General Perez leaned forward. "And who determines what's non-essential?" "They do," Eric replied grimly. "By these terms, they could drain our oceans if they wanted to." While Earth's leaders debated the treaty, Lisa Dawson took a more direct approach. Using modifications to the ambassador's shuttle created by Jack Nelson, she managed to plant a small data receiver on a hegemony crew member during a public demonstration of their technology. The risk was enormous, but it paid off. That night, secure in the underground facility, Lisa downloaded communications from inside the hegemony ship. "I've got it," she called to Alan and Susan, who rushed to her side. Internal briefings, crew logs, everything. The data confirmed their fears. One recording showed Zixtar speaking to his superiors. "The humans remain unaware of our true assessment. Phase 1 proceeds as planned. Their technological level poses no significant obstacle to standard colonization procedures." Another file contained historical records of other civilizations that had encountered the hegemony. The pattern was always the same: friendly contact, protective treaties, then gradual takeover as the empire stripped worlds of resources and reduced populations to labor forces. "Look at this world, Nexus 7. Alan pointed at a star chart. According to these records, it was once home to a thriving civilization with technology similar to ours. Now it's listed as fully integrated, a mining colony with most of its original inhabitants relocated. Captain Susan Miller studied the technical data Jack had extracted. "They're overconfident," she said thoughtfully. "Their records show no serious resistance in over 300 years. They don't expect us to fight back." Jack had been working day and night on a prototype defense system based on the vulnerability he'd discovered in the hegemony's technology. "It's risky," he explained, showing them the device. "This emitter creates a frequency pattern that should temporarily disrupt their shield harmonics, but we've only got theoretical models to work from." "Keep developing it," Susan ordered. "We need every advantage we can get." On the 18th day after the treaty presentation, Earth's leaders gathered for a critical vote. The hegemony had made their position clear: sign the treaty or face consequences for rejecting imperial protection. Some nations argued for acceptance, believing humanity could negotiate better terms later. Others insisted on resistance, regardless of the cost. "We can't sign this," Eric stated firmly in the closed session. "This isn't a treaty between equals. It's surrender paperwork." Outside the UN building, protesters filled the streets. Some carried signs welcoming the aliens and their advanced technology. Others warned of colonization and slavery. The world was divided, afraid, and uncertain. In orbit, more hegemony ships arrived daily, positioning themselves strategically around the planet. They called them diplomatic escorts and cultural exchange vessels, but Susan's team identified weapons systems and troop transport capabilities on every one. "They're surrounding us," Susan reported to the Security Council. "Standard military encirclement. If we refuse the treaty, they'll be positioned for immediate action." Time was running out. Earth had less than 2 weeks left to submit to the Empire or face the consequences. But in secure facilities around the world, humans worked frantically on a plan, one that would show the hegemony they had gravely underestimated the third planet from an unremarkable yellow star. The Empire had set its sights on Earth. They were about to learn that humans don't surrender easily. Dr. Alan Carter stared at the brain scan results in disbelief. He had been comparing human neurological patterns to the limited data they had gathered on hegemony physiology, looking for any advantage. What he found exceeded his wildest hopes. "The difference is remarkable," he explained to Susan and the others. "Human neural pathways reconfigure up to 8 times faster than the hegemony standard. We adapt more quickly than they can." "Adapt to what?" Lisa asked, leaning closer to see the scans. "Everything. New environments, new information, new technologies." Alan could barely contain his excitement. According to their own records, they consider technological development to be predictable, following set patterns across centuries. But Earth went from horse-drawn carriages to spaceflight in less than 70 years. This discovery explained why the hegemony had specific protocols for what they called standard development worlds. They weren't used to species that could leap forward technologically in a single generation. They'd assumed we're decades away from understanding their basic systems. Alan concluded, but we've already reverse-engineered parts of their communication technology. Captain Susan Miller saw the strategic advantage immediately. They're underestimating us. We can use that. She organized what appeared to be a standard military exercise, inviting the hegemony to observe Earth's conventional defense capabilities. The aliens watched with barely concealed amusement as fighter jets and naval vessels performed maneuvers that must have seemed primitive to them. Your defensive capabilities are impressive for your development stage, Ambassador Zix-Tar commented condescendingly. The hegemony will help you advance beyond such limited technologies once the protection treaty is signed. What the ambassador didn't know was that the exercise was cover for testing Jack's new weapon. Hidden aboard one of the aircraft carriers, the prototype successfully disrupted a small drone built with reverse-engineered hegemony technology. It works, Jack reported later, his face flushed with triumph. Limited range, but the principle is sound. Their shields become temporarily unstable when hit with the right frequency combination. Meanwhile, Lisa and Eric had made contact with representatives from other worlds under hegemony control. Using the communication codes they had obtained, they established secret channels with resistance movements that had formed on several fully integrated planets. They've been fighting the hegemony for generations, Lisa told the others. Always in hiding, always careful. But they shared valuable intelligence on Imperial protocols and weaknesses. One piece of information proved particularly useful. The hegemony never expected serious resistance from protection worlds. Their standard procedure was to make a show of force against minimal opposition, accepting immediate surrender. They don't have contingency plans for protracted conflict with lower-tech worlds, Eric explained. It simply doesn't happen in their experience. With 5 days remaining before the treaty deadline, Susan presented their strategy to world leaders. It was dangerous, possibly suicidal, but it offered something precious. A chance. We can't match their numbers or technology, she admitted. But we don't need to win a war. We need to send a message that taking Earth will cost more than they're willing to pay. The plan required global cooperation unlike anything in human history. Military forces would coordinate under a unified command. Power grids would temporarily shut down to mask energy signatures. And Jack's disruption technology would be deployed on a massive scale for one critical moment. We have one chance to show them we're not like the others, Susan said firmly. One chance to demonstrate that humans are different. As the deadline approached, the hegemony ships moved closer to Earth, confident in their overwhelming superiority. On their command vessels, Imperial officers discussed how best to display their power once the humans inevitably refused the treaty. None of them suspected that the primitives were preparing something unprecedented. Earth's warning was about to be delivered, and it would change the galaxy forever. The day of the treaty deadline arrived with a tense stillness. Hegemony ships moved into lower orbit, their massive hulls visible to the naked eye as dark shapes crossing the sun. Ambassador Zix-Tar stood before the United Nations General Assembly, 4 arms clasped in front of him in what humans now recognized as a gesture of assumed superiority. The Empire has shown great patience, the ambassador stated. Your protective treaty awaits only your signature. Should you unwisely decline, we will be forced to demonstrate why all civilized worlds accept hegemony guidance. Behind the ambassador, screens displayed the diplomatic fleet, now surrounding Earth. Secretary General Paris stood to deliver humanity's response, her voice steady despite the weight of the moment. We have carefully considered your generous offer, she began, following the formal protocol exactly as expected. Earth has made its decision. While the world watched this exchange, Captain Susan Miller sat in the Global Defense Command Center deep underground. Around her, military personnel from 28 nations monitored their stations in tense silence. Satellite network status, Susan asked. All units in position and powered down, Jack replied. They'll register as inactive debris on their scans. The plan had required extraordinary cooperation. In the past week, hundreds of satellites had been quietly repositioned, each carrying a small version of Jack's disruption technology. They waited in dormant mode, virtually invisible to hegemony sensors among the existing orbital debris. Over secure communication channels, Susan received confirmation from military commands worldwide. Everyone was in position. Everything was ready. On the screen, Secretary General Perez continued her carefully scripted response. While Earth appreciates the hegemony's interest, we must respectfully decline your protection treaty. The ambassador's upper arms twitched slightly, the only sign of his surprise at the direct refusal. I regret your decision. The Empire will now be forced to demonstrate why protection is in your best interest. As if on cue, the largest hegemony vessel, a capital ship nearly 2 miles long, moved into position directly over the United Nations building. Its weapon systems began to power up, creating a visible glow along its underside. They're charging primary systems, Lisa reported, watching the energy signatures spike on her monitor. Exactly as predicted. Susan took a deep breath. Execute Operation Warning Shot. Around the world, power grids temporarily dimmed as massive amounts of energy were diverted to hidden transmitters. In orbit, the seemingly dead satellites simultaneously activated, each targeting the same precise frequencies at the hegemony capital ship. For 3 seconds, nothing seemed to happen. Then a ripple of energy visibly passed across the massive vessel's hull. Its lights flickered, and the weapon glow faded. Direct hit, Jack called out. Shield harmonics disrupted. On another screen, they watched as Ambassador Zix Tar received an urgent communication. His normally composed features showed clear alarm. Their main systems are temporarily offline, Lisa confirmed. Weapons, propulsion, communications, everything except life support. In the General Assembly, Secretary General Perez waited as the ambassador processed what was happening. When she spoke again, her voice was firm. Ambassador, please deliver this message to your empire. Earth is not like other worlds you have encountered. We have no desire for conflict, but we will not be colonized. The technology that just disabled your flagship could have been used more destructively. It wasn't, because we wish to establish peaceful relations. As equals. The disabled ship hung motionless in orbit, its imposing silhouette now a symbol of imperial vulnerability. Susan's team watched as smaller hegemony vessels rushed to assist, clearly unprepared for this scenario. Send the final message, Susan ordered. On every frequency the hegemony used, in their own language and in English, the same words were transmitted. This is our only warning. Earth is not for conquest. For the first time, in 3 centuries, the Galactic Empire faced something unexpected, a primitive world that could bite back. The message was clear. Taking Earth would cost far more than the Empire was accustomed to paying. In orbit, the hegemony ships pulled back to a higher position, their confident formation now scattered and uncertain. Humanity had delivered its warning. The real test was about to begin. Ambassador Zix Tar departed Earth orbit the next day. His final message was brief. The hegemony will consider your demonstration. The massive ships pulled back beyond the moon but remained visible to Earth's telescopes, hanging like dark stars against the blackness of space. They're regrouping, not retreating, Susan told the Emergency Council. Our warning bought us time, nothing more. She was right. 3 days later, Earth's deep space monitoring stations detected a massive energy surge at the edge of the solar system. The hegemony had opened a jump point, their method of faster-than-light travel, and new ships were arriving. These aren't the same class as before, Alan said, studying the sensor readings. Bigger. Military configuration. and a lot more of them. Intercepted communications revealed that Admiral Krell, a senior hegemony commander with a reputation for crushing resistance on frontier worlds, had been dispatched to handle the Earth situation. His orders were simple: demonstrate the consequences of defying the Empire. Earth had perhaps 2 weeks before the new fleet reached orbital range. We need something more than a temporary disruption, Susan said, looking at her team. They'll have adapted to the frequency pattern we used. Jack nodded grimly. They're already modifying their shields. We need a completely new approach. Dr. Alan Carter led a global team of scientists working around the clock to understand more about hegemony technology. Every piece of data from the disabled capital ship was analyzed, every transmission frequency studied. Nations that had been enemies for generations now shared their most advanced research freely. Meanwhile, Lisa and Jack made a critical discovery. Look at this, Lisa said, pointing to a strange pattern in the hegemony's power distribution system. Their entire technology is built around quantum entanglement principles, but there's a fundamental instability in how they manage it. Jack's eyes widened as he understood. It's like they've built on a flawed foundation. They're so advanced they've never needed to fix it. The two worked feverishly to develop a theory that might exploit this weakness. If they were right, Earth might have a chance. If wrong, humanity would face the full might of an empire that spanned 1,000 worlds. As Admiral Krell's fleet approached, Earth underwent a transformation. Ancient rivalries were set aside. Resources were pooled. Military forces integrated under a unified command structure. Cities built underground shelters. People planted victory gardens and learned emergency skills. They expect us to crumble in fear, Eric told the UN Security Council. History shows the hegemony has never faced united resistance from a target world. Satellite imagery showed the Imperial fleet taking position. 30 capital ships, hundreds of smaller vessels, all arranged in perfect formation. Admiral Krell sent a simple message: surrender now and accept Imperial authority, or face extinction. Earth's response was equally brief: we are prepared to defend ourselves. In orbit, a new satellite network had been hastily constructed and disguised as debris. On the ground, massive energy facilities stood ready. Every nation had contributed their best technology and brightest minds to the defense plan. Will it work? Secretary General Perez asked Susan privately, hours before the expected attack. Honestly, I don't know, Susan replied. But I do know this: every simulation the hegemony has run about how species like us behave is wrong. We don't think like they do. We don't give up like they expect. The night before Admiral Krell's deadline, Jack and Lisa made the final adjustments to their quantum disruption system. Based on the flaw they'd discovered, it would target the very foundation of the Empire's technological advantage. This goes beyond shutting down their shields, Jack explained to the Defense Council. If this works, it will temporarily neutralize all their quantum-based systems. And if it doesn't? Asked the general. Lisa exchanged a look with Jack before answering. Then we've shown the galaxy that humans died on their feet rather than lived on their knees. As dawn broke over Earth, Admiral Krell's fleet moved into attack position. Humanity prepared to make its stand against the stars. Admiral Krell's flagship led the hegemony fleet into Earth's orbit with deadly precision. 30 massive capital ships formed a perfect attack pattern, their weapons systems glowing with building energy. Smaller vessels moved to strategic positions around the planet. From the ground, it looked like new stars appearing in the daylight sky. All Imperial ships in final position, Lisa reported, watching the tactical display in the command center. Energy readings indicate weapon systems at full charge. Around the world, people looked up at the sky with a mixture of fear and defiance. Some prayed. Others held loved ones close. All knew this was humanity's moment of truth. Admiral Krell's face appeared on screens globally, his scaled features arranged in what the hegemony considered a diplomatic expression. Your resistance is unprecedented but futile. The Empire has never failed to subdue a world once targeted. Surrender now and your population will be preserved. Secretary General Perez delivered Earth's final response. "We choose freedom." Krell's expression hardened, then witnessed the consequence of defiance. The Imperial ships fired simultaneously, energy beams reaching down toward Earth's major cities. For a heartbeat, it seemed the end had come. But the beams never reached their targets. "Now," Susan ordered. Jack activated the quantum disruption system. Across the planet, massive energy transmitters powered up, sending precisely calibrated signals to the hidden satellite network. The satellites amplified the signal, directing it at the specific quantum frequency Lisa had identified as the hegemony's technological vulnerability. In orbit, something extraordinary happened. The energy weapons dissipated harmlessly. Ship lights flickered and died. Propulsion systems failed. The perfect formation dissolved into chaos as vessels drifted helplessly. "It's working," Alan shouted, watching the sensor readings. Total systems failure across their fleet. The disruption wasn't destructive. It simply rendered the hegemony's advanced technology temporarily inoperative. Their ships floated powerless, their crews unable to understand how primitives could have discovered their fundamental weakness. "Send the message," Susan ordered. Earth broadcast on all frequencies, transmitting not just to the disabled fleet, but to every corner of the Empire. The message included detailed technical specifications revealing the quantum flaw in hegemony technology, information now being shared with every subjugated world. Admiral Krell, Secretary General Perez spoke calmly into the camera. "Your fleet will regain power in approximately 1 hour. When it does, you have two choices: leave our system and acknowledge Earth as a sovereign power, or face the same vulnerability again, this time with more permanent consequences." She paused before continuing. "Be aware that we have shared this knowledge with every world under Imperial control. The hegemony's technological advantage no longer exists." In the following hours, the Imperial fleet slowly regained function, but instead of resuming attack, they withdrew to a safe distance. Admiral Krell requested direct negotiations. 1 week later, the hegemony signed the first equal treaty in its 300-year history. Earth was recognized as an independent world, off-limits to Imperial exploitation. More importantly, the treaty acknowledged the right of all intelligent species to self-determination. It was the beginning of a new era. Across the galaxy, worlds that had suffered under Imperial rule began their own resistance, using the vulnerability Earth had exposed. The hegemony, faced with widespread rebellion, was forced to reform. Dr. Alan Carter, Captain Susan Miller, Jack Nelson, and Lissa Dawson became Earth's first representatives to the wider galactic community. They traveled to formerly subjugated worlds, helping them build their own defenses and establish independence. "We never wanted to fight," Susan explained to a gathering of species on the planet Nexus 7, now free after generations of Imperial control. "But we refused to surrender our home." A representative from a race much older than humanity nodded in understanding. "You showed the galaxy something it had forgotten. That true strength isn't measured by technological advancement, but by the will to remain free." On Earth, humanity looked to the stars with new understanding. They were not alone, and they were not helpless. They had faced the greatest power in the galaxy and stood their ground. The Empire had set its sights on Earth, and humanity had given its one warning. It was enough.